Good morning and welcome to Free Advice Friday. My name is Keri Barnum for New Shelves Books, and today it is my pleasure to have special guest Marika Flatt with us. Marika is award-winning publicist and the founder of PR by the Book. She's worked with thousands of national and regional publicity campaigns over the past 25 years. She's a regular speaker at conferences around the country, educating audiences on topics related to publicity and overall promotion tactics. And she has decided and agreed to come here for Free Advice Friday and answer all of our questions. So, Marika, thank you so much for being our guest today.
I'm thrilled. Thank you for having me. This is fun. Fun way to kick off a Friday morning.
It absolutely is. And I love that you very much focus on PR. We're talking about
Mhm,
things like social media or earned media,
mhm.
but you kind of have a range of things. And can you tell me a little bit about the differences between PR, publicity, and marketing?
Absolutely. So this was a big topic a few weeks ago. I was out at San Francisco Writers Conference, and we talked quite a bit about this because the easiest way to really explain it is that PR is really focused on the media relations. It's what we call earned media. So there's no money exchanged. Marketing, and I'm going to go back to that in just a second. Marketing is typically something that you're spending money on. So it's part of paid media, which could include advertising. It could be social media advertising, other types of advertising. It could be something as old-fashioned as creating bookmarks, that you're going to hand out. It could be different budget that you spend to try to get in front of someone else's audience. So it could also be working with a paid influencer, for instance. Whereas publicity is really focused on those earned opportunities. So think about what's left of print media. There's radio, television, podcasts, digital media outlets abound. So everything from a large online magazine to way back this feels a little vintage too, but book bloggers that are still out there. Um, and, nowadays we incorporate a lot of different things into that earned media. So for instance, if we're working with a journalist that maybe also has their own social media that they're going to put their article out on, they have maybe they review books on their own personal Goodreads or Amazon account. So sometimes if you get what we call a media hit with an earned media outlet, it can end up being exposure in 4 or 5 different places. But that publicity is really focused on that media relations.
Yeah, and I love you did a beautiful job of simplifying that because it can be quite the talk and quite the argument in some circles.
Mhm.
And I think you did a great job with that. And would you say that publicity is one of those things that does require more time or effort from the person being featured? Like they have to contribute something typically
Mhm.
to be featured. Would you say that's correct?
Right. And so I get that question sometimes when I'm talking to a potential client is, what is if I hire a PR by the book, what is my time commitment? And, I always say, first and foremost, we're trying to make your life easier. We're trying to save you time because if you're doing your own publicity, yes, it can be very time intensive. And we'll circle back to that here in a minute. Um, but there is time needed on behalf of the author for things like and whether you're working with a publicist or you're doing this on your own, for instance, creating contributed articles that can be placed, making sure that you're getting those written up and kind of have them in your back pocket, so to speak. Articles that are, let's say, 500 to 700 words, you can always add to them if needed. But to have those kind of ready in the waiting. Also, just being available for interviews takes time as well. So working that into your schedule, we work with a lot of authors who are very busy. They have really busy day jobs, like maybe they're a doctor or an attorney or a professor. And so we work around those schedules. We try to figure out, what are their blackout dates and times? Do they maybe have a couple of windows in the week where they can just put that into their calendar and say, okay, this is my time for interviews, so that we know, okay, Tuesday morning, 8 to 10 a.m., for instance, is open to us to book interviews. Now, granted, the media doesn't always work into those nice little windows, but at least it helps the author realize I have to have time set aside to be available to the media. And so those are just a couple of examples of time that is required by the author. Those are not things that anybody else can do for you as an author. So you have to work those into your schedule.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I'm a big fan of saying that marketing a book or making a book successful takes time, money, or very often both. You do need to kind of allocate resources if you want to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about social media. We were chatting a little bit about that and how social media has been a little crazy this week with
Mm-hmm.
outages. But
Mm-hmm.
I would love your take on social media. Do authors have to be on every platform if they're trying to get publicity?
No, we encourage authors to pick two that they feel is the better fit for them. And that could be because of their topic. For instance, let's say they're a business author. Obviously, they want to be on LinkedIn. Let's say they're a lifestyle book, for instance. Well, obviously, they need to be on Instagram. So sometimes it's a factor of what is the best social media platform for your book, what matches up with it the best. And then other times it's what do you enjoy the most? I mean, I've got authors who absolutely love Facebook. Maybe they're Gen X like me, and that's what they feel more comfortable with. And then I've got others that might be in the same age category that absolutely love TikTok. They love making the videos. They love engaging with their audience on TikTok. So it's really a combination of those two factors. What is the best fit in terms of content, of your content that you're putting out there, and what do you enjoy the most? And so pick two and really focus on those two. And of course you can be on others, but we can all pretty much agree that if we're doing our own social media, that it could be a full-time job if we're on a lot of them. Say you're on 5 platforms. I mean, gosh, you could spend a majority of an 8-hour workday creating that content, scheduling that content, engaging with that content. So yeah.
Yeah. And
And
so we
Jane
have a
asked about a
question.
cozy mystery.
Yeah. What's your opinion? What are the best platforms for cozy mystery authors?
Well, I would lean towards 3 different ones and pick the 2 that you feel like you enjoy the most. Facebook is always going to be a good platform for fiction. Instagram is having its heyday in terms of book promotion because there's so many bookstagrammers out there on Instagram. And they're going to be wanting to give attention to people who are also on Instagram. So for instance, somebody hires us and we're creating a virtual book tour, which we could talk a little bit more about that later. We have a lot of really good media friends on Instagram. But if we're trying to push an author who's not on Instagram on our virtual book tour, it's a lot harder because they want to know that if they're doing that promotion, that the author is going to be sharing everything on Instagram. I would also say for fiction, I mean, we can't not talk about TikTok when it comes to fiction of any kind, because we've seen people just their careers explode on TikTok that are novelists. So I would say out of those 3, decide what you enjoy the most, or do all 3 if that's, if that's your preference.
Yeah, and I would absolutely agree with that. And it's really nice. I will say that Facebook and Instagram integrate. So sometimes you can double
Yes.
post rather than having separate things. But you mentioned something that I would love to expand on. You mentioned that if you're going to be featured by an Instagrammer, they want you to have Instagram. So, how important is not only having the platform, but the numbers of your followers on those platforms? Does having a certain number of followers or being interactive on those platforms make a author more likely to be featured on certain platforms?
Yeah, and gosh, I wish we had Kimberly here, our digital media director. She's a whiz at topics that relate to the specific social media platforms. But Instagram it's such a long game. It's so hard to build up your platform. It just takes so much time to build it up, and it's the right thing to do to build it organically. We know a lot of people were not building organically in the past and got dinged for it. So you do want to build it up organically, and it is very difficult. Over 10,000 followers is when you can post links and have a little bit more leeway with what you're putting out there. So that's the first notch that people want to get over. Now, I will say we like the micro influencers out there because they haven't gotten so big that they're charging for posts yet, but they still have really good followers and numbers out there. And so for us at PR by the Book, that's a little bit of the sweet spot in terms of our virtual book tours, because the big influencers, we're not gonna pay $500 for them to write a sentence. And so that category, of that middle ground is really good. Related to your question about, what is that level? I think that the bookstagrammers that we work with a lot on our virtual book tours, they're not so picky as to say, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to look at that person's following, and if they don't hit, if they're not over 10,000, I'm not really interested. We have very few that will get as picky about it as that. A lot of them, they're looking at our book covers and they're looking at our one paragraph description, and if it interests them, then they're going to participate. And everybody has their own personal book interests. We all do. So it's really, I would say, more about the presentation of how we present it to the bookstagrammer versus the followership of the author. But they will go look and see if they're on Instagram. And that kind of circles around to something that I definitely want to just give a little push for, and that is a great book cover. So if you want to help your publicist or if you're promoting your own book and you want to help yourself, make sure you've got a great book cover to begin with, because that is one of the key pieces. I can't tell you how many times this comes up in conversation with my PR by the Book team. It's more and more and more just in the past month. I mean, we've had such long, big discussions about certain book covers that have come across our desk.
Yeah.
And, it's just so important because people will judge a book by its cover.
Mhm.
And in this day and age, if you're self-publishing, or even if you're a hybrid, you have to look like you're coming from one of the big traditional houses. And it starts with your book cover. So,
It does. And your book cover also has to be, it doesn't just have to be beautiful. It has to fit the market. I think that's one thing that authors will sometimes get hung up on is either they have this idea in their head of what they like or they want, or it's just
mhm.
a really pretty like art piece, but not necessarily a marketable cover. And I've told people, I'm sorry, I can't take your money because your book cover will keep you from being successful, in my opinion. And I've had to turn people away because of that before. And I think it is so important to have a marketable book cover because it's the face of your book. It's the first thing everyone sees typically.
hmm Yeah, and my biggest tip that I love to give to authors who are in that realm of self-publishing related to that is check out 99designs.com
Mhm.
because they're and I don't have any affiliation with them at all. But we are actually working on a blog post right now to show like before and afters of
Mhm.
some of our clients that we've worked with that have utilized that. Because it's been like day and night in terms of before the book cover that they come to us with before and then what they get after.
Yeah, and Elaine is asking, a Barnes and Noble manager told me this week that covers need to be matte, that gloss is a self-pub giveaway, and the interior paper antique white. Is that true? So I'll answer that one.
Yeah.
In very rare cases, I will say sometimes we will see glossy covers, certainly in children's books. When they still have sticky fingers, absolutely, we'll see glossy covers. We will also see glossy covers sometimes in Christian nonfiction specifically, but matte is kind of the standard for most traditionally published books. It's very rare we see a glossy cover anymore. And the standard is kind of for nonfiction, we tend to see white paper, brilliant white, and then for fiction, we tend to see the cream or the antique white. Yes, it's the little things
Yes.
that matter. Um,
Yes.
Now for social media, going back to that, when people are posting, I see this a lot, and I'd love your opinion, where people are aggressively posting about their book, about their everything that's going on up until launch day, maybe a week after, and then they just stop.
Mhm.
Which I think is a disservice. I think that they should be
Mhm.
posting long term about their book. But do you
Mhm.
see that? What's your opinion, and how do you see that affecting PR opportunities and publicity?
Yeah, I have a lot to say on this topic. First and foremost, I want to start with in the year of 2024, I have been really working on trying to educate authors of when you sit down and think about your book, first and foremost, plan for a year of promotion. You can always go longer than that, but don't sell yourself short with a strategy that's less than a year. So really think about it in terms of a year when you first sit down. Of course, the first thing that typically starts in that process is building up your social media. And what we always tell people, because we have a digital department, we have PR department and a digital department, and our digital department does provide social media only campaigns, but we tell people at the very beginning that, don't hire us to handle your social media for 3 or 4 months and then just let it drop. Because that is not a good investment of your dollars or your energy or your focus and we don't want to see that either. We don't want to work hard on somebody's social media for 3 or 4 months and then the books come out and then it just dies on the vine. So yes, make sure that you are continuing, what does that year look like after your publication date? I am a huge advocate of timely tie-ins. I love to talk about timely tie-ins. They're one of my favorite things as a publicist. So a timely tie-in would be something like, oh, and by the way, I did see a little comment that somebody mentioned National Women's Day today.
Yeah.
So that's an example of a timely tie-in. The whole month of March is considered Women's History Month. April, we have coming up Stress Awareness Month, which is a really big, important one for a lot of different topics. April is also called Dear Month, which is really cute. It's Drop Everything and Read Month. May, we have Mental Health Awareness Month. We have Older Americans Month. We have a couple of gift guide opportunities in May with Mother's Day and graduation. These are all timely tie-ins. I could go on for the entire year. I've got them on the top of my brain here.
Love it.
Um, but I love timely tie-ins, not only for social media, but for PR. We use them in all of our pitches.
Mhm.
So even when we're pitching a media outlet tied to news of the day, which, could fall into place for certain authors, we're still putting the upcoming timely tie-ins on there because it's such a good opportunity to get media attention with a call to action. And I know I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but I just feel really strongly about this in terms of utilizing this, not only for your social media because it makes you relevant and it makes you timely, but in terms of the PR side, which is my day-to-day, it gives that call to action where I can be the journalist and Keri can be the producer, and I'm sending her an email. Hey, Keri, I've got the perfect person for your show. And she loves the idea of the book. She loves how I wrote the pitch. But if I don't have a timely tie-in, it's very easy for her to just slide that email over into her little folder in her Gmail that's like, hey, when I have a slow week, I'm going to go back to this folder. That's not what I want. As a publicist, I want Keri to be looking at that thinking, okay, I'm booked up until maybe I'm booked up through May, but this is a really fun pitch for Best Friends Day on June 8th. And I have an opening on June 8th. Let's go ahead and get this scheduled. That's the response that I want when I send that pitch. So that's why those timely tie-ins are so helpful, is because it is a call to action of let's get this done. I am a pedal to the metal kind of girl. And that's how I
Yeah.
that's how
It creates urgency, right? Like that.
exactly.
It's the same thing. We've all seen the commercials where they're like for one day only. And it's the same idea as creating that urgency of
Yep.
this can't, you need this now. So I think that's
Yes.
a great idea.
Yes.
Um, I would love to know social media. I think we've kind of got two platforms,
Mhm.
pick two platforms at least, be consistent and plan for a year.
Mhm.
Um, we hear often ask your friends, ask your family, but how much should we really be leaning on our personal tribe? And
Mhm.
when is too much?
Mm. Okay, so I'm going to answer this question by first telling everybody about a resource that relates to this question. So 4 years ago, we launched our Author to Influencer Accelerator because we wanted a resource for people who couldn't afford to hire a publicist. They needed something really inexpensive, a resource that would basically guide them, kind of be a concierge for them in their book promotion. And so I like to call it our nonprofit because I'm super passionate about it. I love Author to Influencer because we created this 5-step success path. And it's preparation, platform development, product, planning, which is why we're just about to talk about this, and then promotion. So if people want to look at it afterwards, they can go to authortoinfluencer.com. But I want to talk about step 4, planning, because building up your tribe is exactly what you just asked about. And actually, I have the greatest example from one of our clients. His name is John Pavlovitz. He's a returning client for us. We're actually hired by his publisher, Westminster John Knox Press. So this is the second book that we've gotten to promote for John. And we love him. He's great. He's super outspoken, which is really fun to work with someone that, has a little bit of controversy. He sent out an email earlier this week that I just absolutely loved. I sent it to our entire team. I told Kimberly, our digital media director, let's create a blog post using John as an example of creating your tribe. So he has a huge newsletter list. And I know, Keri, that you asked me about like friends and family, but you can also utilize your newsletter list. This is a whole nother topic that you might have even gotten into in one of your free advice Fridays, but there's a lot of advantages of newsletter promotion over even social media, because we don't own our social media
Right.
real
Yeah,
estate, as we've seen this week.
yeah.
But you own your newsletter list. And what he did is he sent out this very clear email that had it was a list of about 5 bulleted asks of his people that follow him. And it was very clear. It was succinct. It was, this is how you can help me. My book's publication date is such and such date. And here's the 5 steps of how you can get involved and be a part of my tribe. I need you in my village. And, what I find with this is that, and I read a book about this years ago. I heard this guy speak at the Texas Women's Conference, and I can share the book in the chat here in a little bit. But the whole crux of it is that we all love to help others deep down. As humans, I don't care who you are, or it doesn't matter culture, religion, or race, anything. We like to help others. It's good. It's good karma. And I don't know about you, Keri, but if somebody sends me an email like this that says, hey, I need your help, and I know them, I know who they are, can you do A, B, and C? And here's even some written content. Here's some social media content that you can just tweak. I will do it because I believe in good karma. I always believe in paying it forward. It comes around. What you do for others comes back around to you. And so, his 5 points, and again, I'm definitely going to make sure we turn this into a blog post, but we're very specific of, can you please share something like this on your social media? Can you go to this link and do this thing? And so it was very specific, and it was to his newsletter list, like I said, and those people know him. He's got a huge fan base from his newsletter list, but you want to give people plenty of time. That's the other thing, is that when you're asking people to go to Goodreads and review, or go to their Amazon and buy a book and review, give them plenty of time to do it. So his pub date is not until April. So his pub date's early April. And so he's given them about a month to do these things. And that's what I appreciate, because we're all very busy. We have very busy lives. Please don't send something like that out and ask somebody to do it by next week. It's just, you're not going to get a great response because we're all so busy. So just, give them specific steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, this is how you can help me.
Right. Make it easy. I always say, make it easy to say yes. And that is one of those things. Make it easy to say yes. A question, you mentioned that he has a huge list, and we have some questions about, like, how would you gauge that? Like, as far as a good number on a newsletter list, what do you hope to see from authors?
Well, everybody has to start somewhere. I mean, I'm involved with a little magazine. It's called Texas Lifestyle Magazine. It's a little side hustle that celebrates 10 years. And we've had a newsletter for years, and, it's built very slowly. And when we hit 20,000, we got really excited. So you have to build over the years. If you have 20,000 people on your email list as an author, you're doing a great job. You are. Now, granted, I mean, John Pavlovitz, he's been around for many, many years, and he has a large social media following, and I can't tell you what his exact numbers are because I don't know off the top of my head, but he's written several books. He's traditionally published, and he has a pretty large platform. So, he has built up this following over the years. That's the other thing, is that, and again, gosh, I wish we had Kimberly here, our digital media director, because she would love to talk about this more, because this is her lane. But you have to be patient with any kind of build. If it's social media, if it's newsletter, you have to be looking at the long game. People have been building up their followings for years and years and years. It's kind of like when somebody comes to us with PR by the Book. They are a debut author. Nobody knows their name. Nobody's ever heard of them. And they come to us and they think, okay, well, I'm going to pay a publicist and I'm going to get on top tier media. And that is not the expectation. We're not miracle workers. So just because we've been doing this for over 20 years and we have great relationships, it still doesn't mean that I can take a book that nobody's ever heard of the author, and maybe it's not news of the day, and maybe they're even self-published or with a hybrid, and get them on top tier media. That's not going to just be a slam dunk. What I talk to people about is go into any kind of promotion being very realistic with your expectations. Yes, you can always shoot for the stars, and I encourage you to shoot for the stars. But at the end of the day, have a very realistic strategy that focuses the majority of your time in that mid-tier. I always like to explain to people, when it comes to media, I think about media in 3 tiers: low, mid, top. And the low tier media, those are always going to come through because, it's kind of the low hanging fruit. So you don't really need to spend a lot of time there. Top tier, yes, friends, shoot for the stars. But, don't spend the majority of your time there because it's not going to be realistic. Focus on that mid tier of media, because realistically, that's what's going to your biggest audience. So I always explain here at PR by the Book, like our target is the media. That's who our target is. Whereas you as the author, your target is the buyer, the reader, the consumer. 2 different targets, but we're trying to reach the buyer, the reader, the consumer through the media. But if you focus on that mid tier, that is likely where you're going to end up selling the most books, getting the most followers, because it is a media outlet that is most likely going to a very defined audience. Maybe it's a general like mass market audience, but maybe it's like geographically focused, So Texas Lifestyle Magazine would be an example of that for an author that lives in Texas, for instance. So focus on that mid-tier, focus your time and your energy in that middle layer, because that's where you're going to reach the people. And I can tell you stories of 27 years of book promotion, of examples of an author who got on a smaller media outlet and sold more books than they did a top tier outlet. And I'm talking about, I have an example with Fox and Friends versus a small blog. The small blog sold more books because it was targeted to his target reader. Same thing. We had an author on Good Morning America. Honestly, didn't sell very many books at all. And that's a national audience.
Yeah.
Versus, getting into like a trade publication that is smaller and more niche
and focused. I've seen that just this month, or in the past month, I had someone who made a really big media hit, and the response was, I thought it was going to be bigger. And I'm like, nah, you do better, honestly, with your book clubs, because they all buy books. Yeah. And then they talk about it, and then their friends buy the book. So I think it, as you said, it's important to reach for the stars, but also realize you're climbing a mountain. You're not going to go from never having done an interview to being on a really big platform, because they want to see, I hate to put it this way, but they want to see if you're going to choke. They want to see that you can present well, that you can speak. And before going live with anything, but they also, there's a point of earning that. Either you have to have one of those timely tie-ins, or you have to have something that really makes sense for them. You have to have gone viral in some way or gotten their attention. And even then, those bigger tiers, I find you are, again, I hate to put it this way, I'm like crushing dreams, but you're uplifting them, so it's fine. It is one of those
You're a good cop, bad cop.
I know. You're not as big of a deal to those top tier media places, whereas in that mid tier, they want to promote you. You are also a benefit to them. And I think that's also sometimes why we see on that mid tier, you actually get more exposure continuous exposure. They feature you because on that level, you are a really good fit for their audience, which if we're talking about, there are two reasons for publicity and media, right? Like there's just awareness and going on the big things, but there's also that tie into book sales, which is a question that we have is, do you typically see publicity and PR have a direct effect on book sales?
I will say yes and no. We've seen both. So, we have a lot of years of data. I don't think we said, but PR by the Book celebrated 21 years last October. So yeah, we've been doing it for a really long time. And that topic comes up in a lot of my potential client discovery calls that I do. And I tell people that there's been both scenarios, obviously, like constantly we see both. There's a lot of variables that go into book sales. And I always tell people, we measure our success through media exposure, not book sales. So I'm very upfront with people about that from the very beginning. Our lane is media exposure. And so the variables in terms of book sales that we don't have any control over relate to sales and distribution, availability, how well is the author when they get interviewed, or how well do they do when they get interviewed? I'll just give you like a tiny little example. I have an author who is published with a hybrid press, and his book just came out. I got him on a podcast, and I listened to the podcast yesterday, and he did not say the name of the book, the title of the book at all in the entire podcast. He used the name of his organization, but he did not say the book title. And I was like, so the first thing I emailed him after when I finished listening to the podcast was, number one piece of advice, please insert the book title every 3 to 5 minutes if possible. It's easy to do. You can say, well, in my book, such and such, I really talk about this one point, whatever. There's a million ways you can do it. Obviously, you don't want to beat them over the head, but you've got to say the name of the book title. So for instance, we can get an author on a nationally syndicated talk radio show, for instance. There are still those out there. And they don't say they don't say the title of the book. And well, good luck in getting, sales.
Right. Well, and I say that happens more than you would think. Like someone out there who's watching is thinking, well, that's a fluke. No, no, no. This happens more often than you might think.
Mhm.
And I think that is just one of those things. And I love that you talked about media exposure because that is why, and that's why we riff off of each other so well, is because here at New Shelves, we focused on the marketing aspect, which does focus on distribution and how to get the book and those paid advertisements. And in my opinion, I think these things work so well hand in hand because media exposure is social awareness. And then marketing is so that when someone goes, oh, who was that person on that podcast today? They can find and buy your book. So
Mhm.
they kind of do go hand in hand. And that's why I think a lot of people get them confused.
Right.
But media exposure and sales and marketing are different. But I will tell you, it's easier to close the sale when you've had media exposure, which is why it's so
Mhm.
important.
Right. You're right. It all ties in together. Everything is like a piece of the pie. So marketing is a piece of the pie, publicity is a piece of the pie, doing your own social media is a piece of the pie. It's all important, and you want all of those pieces to be in place and work together and be a part of your overall strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit the differences that we might see in a fiction and a nonfiction PR campaign?
Mm. Yes. So where do I begin? So right now we have more fiction than we've ever had in our history. We actually have 1/3 of our client base is fiction right now.
Wow.
And used to, like, in a really big fiction month, maybe we pushed up to a quarter, But so we have a lot of fiction in our stable of authors. And obviously, the first thing is that between fiction and nonfiction, it's much easier to come up with talking points that are relevant to news of the day or even timely tie-ins when you've got nonfiction. But with fiction, we rely more heavily on reviews, all types of reviews, our virtual book tours, which I alluded to earlier, and helping them on their social media as well. So if they're doing their own social media, we're consulting with them on how to maximize that typically. So we're really focusing in on those areas, also sprinkling in some good publicity opportunities, starting with their local and regional media. If they have a book launch party that they're celebrating their book launch, of course, we're pushing that to their local and regional media as well. We're focusing on podcasts that are really targeted to the literary community versus something that is more topic driven, for instance.
Right.
So I will tell you, big picture, there is no difference in the timing and the timeline of the fiction and nonfiction campaigns that we do. We have a fun fact that our longest running clients, both consecutively and then, so I have two clients in mind. One is somebody that we've worked with many times over 10 years. So he's been with us for maybe 6 or 7 book campaigns over a 10+ year period of time. He's fiction. And then our longest continuous running client is also fiction. He is published with a hybrid press, and he's about to release his second book, and he has stayed with us since I believe about 6 months prior to his first book on our Constant Connections campaign. So that's a maintenance campaign that somebody can drop down to once their book launch is done. And so it's much less expensive, but it's continuing to push them out. It's proactive. It's not just reactive type work in terms of publicity. So he's been with us for almost 2 years consecutively, and he's fiction. So I guess what I wanted to just explain in relation to that is that it doesn't mean, if you're fiction, doesn't mean that you have any less opportunities in terms of getting media exposure. You just have to be strategic on the type of media that you're going after, the way that you're presenting it to the media outlet. And there's so many opportunities to get press for fiction. I mean, might have to get a little bit more creative.
Right. Tie into those holidays and all those big things. And I think that is so true. And I think too, when we talk about fiction, sometimes it ties more into using awards or and we have talked about book tours and Instagram tours and things like that. So we're familiar with them. But sometimes it's what might be radio interviews and featured articles on nonfiction might be awards in Bookstagrammers and Book Talk for fiction. So I think that it's one of those things. One tie-in question that we had is what is the ideal time to run a PR campaign for a book? And is it ever too late to run PR on a book?
Oh my gosh, there's so many good questions that are popping up in the chat. And we're not going to get to all of them, but everybody has my contact information so they can get those questions answered. Okay, it's different, and I'm being very conscientious of your in time here, Keri. So it's different whether you are traditionally published, hybrid, or self-published. Okay, the timeline is, and I'm going to try to explain that really quickly. If you're traditionally published, there's a good chance that your in-house publicity team is going to handle long lead outreach. And long lead outreach happens 4.5 to 6 months prior to pub date, primarily to book trade media. There's about 6 to 8 that are important. And then also top tier media outlets that need an advanced review copy way in advance. So that's long lead. Now, short lead typically starts 2 to 3 months prior to pub date. That's all you need if you are self-published. Self-published authors do not need to hire a publicist long lead because they don't have access to those book trade review opportunities. They can pay for it, but they can also pay for it 2 or 3 months prior as well. So the ideal timeline is to make sure that your publicity campaign is up and running, rocking and rolling 2 to 3 months prior to pub date, no matter how you're published. And if you are with a hybrid press, and somebody asked the difference of hybrid, we go into that a lot in our author to influencer, if anybody needs to get that information. A hybrid is basically, it's blending the two. It's blending traditional with self-publishing, and both sides have an investment in within a hybrid. And there's a lot of hybrids out there. Keri, I don't know if you saw that article that came out in Publishers Weekly this week of so there's a brand new hybrid that was started by some top level executives from a lot of the traditional big five publishing companies. So super interesting, sign of the times right there. So anyway, I'm going down a little rabbit hole, but we could talk all day.
So if it's traditional, 4 to 6 months out is when their publisher team will typically do that. If they want to work with a additional publicist, how early do you recommend they start?
At least 2 to 3 months prior to pub date. And that doesn't mean contact the publicist 2 to 3 months prior to pub date. That means like contact the publicist 6, 8 months prior to pub date to make sure you get a spot during that time frame. And then I wanted to make sure and answer that very important question that you said, is it too late after the book has come out? And the answer to that is no. We have a lot of publicity campaigns that we work on for books that are already out. We just look at them on a case-by-case basis and, really look and see, what has been done? If nothing's been done, what's our publicity vision for this book? And internally, we refer to those typically as experts campaigns because we're focusing on their expertise and getting them publicity based on their topic of expertise. And sometimes it works with fiction too. You just have to focus on your efforts in the right areas. It's a little bit trickier with fiction.
Right. So is it ever too late? Like, is there ever a time where you're like, this is lovely, wait for your next book?
Yes, definitely. And that's why, we always look at each project that comes across our desk with a customized eye. And because I've been doing this for so long, I think I have a pretty good sense of, and I'll be completely honest with someone also. Many times I've said, okay, do you have another book in you? And what does that time frame look like? And if the answer is yes, I say, here's all the things that you can do now. Focus on these areas right now, and then hire a publicist 6 months before that next book or 3 months before that next book. And so I will be very transparent with people.
Yeah, I think that's so important because sometimes it is like, okay, it's a little dated and it won't work as well. Don't invest into that. Invest in something new.
Right.
I hate that we have to go because we have so many great questions and everyone wants to know what is the best way to get in contact with you to continue the conversation or more. I can't even talk. Learn more about PR by the book and your author to influencer program.
Okay, so PR by the book is very simple, prbythebook.com. We have contact information page on there that goes straight to Melissa, who's my right hand, and we work together. We send out a welcome email that has heaps of important information and links in our welcome email, everything from a one-pager on our offerings to a 12-minute video with me that's like an FAQ type of video. And then a link to book a call with me. All that stuff is in the welcome email. Authortoinfluencer.com is the website for our accelerator program. I always recommend people sign up for the annual because it's super inexpensive. It works out to like $38 a month on the annual. and you get into the private Facebook group, and you're going to get way more than $38 a month of value. And especially if you attend the power hours that are like built-in consulting. But you can do month to month too, if you want to. I think it's like $47 a month if you go month to month. So author-to-influencer.com, prbythebook.com, those are the most direct ways to get in and get more information.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking your time with us today. It was really eye-opening. I love especially all the tips, but those timely tie-ins, I think, is one of like my key takeaways, that timely tie-ins can work for fiction, nonfiction, and it creates urgency, and urgency is what creates features. So
That's
thank you
right.
so much for that. Everybody, go find Marika online. We did drop her links here. They'll also be on the replay. So we will put this replay up on YouTube, which is simply youtube.com/New Shelves Books. And we'll link to all of Marika's links on there as well, so you can find them later. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Marika, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.